Whenever you see the church go down, it's always an inside job. Whenever you see the church go down, it's always an inside job. It's always an inside job. It's always an inside job. Whenever you see the church go down, it's always an inside job.
Beware. The enemy is very much within the Holy Roman Catholic Church. On the most sacred night in the history of mankind, as the Son of God instituted the Eucharist and the priesthood, the serpent was there, whispering in the ear of Judas Iscariot. Let's go through some examples. Number 1, at the Last Supper, Jesus Christ dipped the bread and gave it to Judas Iscariot. John chapter 13, verse 30, quote, "He therefore, having received the morsel, went out immediately, and it was night." Close quote. Number 2, in the Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew chapter 10, the Son of God tells his 12 disciples, quote, "Do not think that I came to send peace upon the earth. I came not to send peace, but the sword. For I came to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's enemies shall be they of his own household." Close quote. Number 3, in a December the 26th, 1957 interview with Father Fuentes, Sister Lucia Fatima said, quote, "That which afflicts the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the heart of Jesus is the fall of religious and priestly souls. The devil knows that religious and priests who fall away from their beautiful vocation drag numerous souls to hell. The devil wishes to take possession of consecrated souls. He tries to corrupt them in order to lull to sleep the souls of lay people and thereby lead them to final impenitence." Close quote. Number 4, in a letter written on September the 16th, 1970, Sister Lucia Fatima wrote, quote, "The devil has been able to infiltrate evil under the guise of good." Close quote. And, quote, "The devil has succeeded in deluding and deceiving souls who have much responsibility because of the positions they occupy. They are the blind leading the blind." Close quote. Number 5, by the year 1527, King Henry VIII of England was intent upon putting away his wife of 18 years, Queen Catherine, and replacing her with Anne Boleyn. He sought the support of John Fisher, one of the most eminent men of his day. Fisher had been a model bishop of the Diocese of Rochester for 23 years, in an age when the lives of many bishops were less than edifying. He had been a favorite of King Henry's father and grandmother. He had been Chancellor of the University of Cambridge, a member of the King's Privy Council, a leader in the House of Lords and among the clergy, and was universally recognized for piety and learning. St. John Fisher opposed King Henry's marital treachery and declared that Henry and Catherine were true man and wife, their daughters were legitimate, and that what God had joined, no man should sunder. King Henry convoked all of England's hierarchy and demanded that he be given the title Protector and Supreme Head of the English Church and Clergy. St. John Fisher led the opposition to this almost alone. When in his sickbed Fisher heard that nearly all the prelates had signed an oath affirming Henry's supremacy and repudiating the Pope's authority, he said, quote, "The fort is betrayed," close quote, thus laying the blame more on perfidious ecclesiastics than on the willful king. About 95% of the English bishops and clergy betrayed Holy Mother Church. On June the 22nd, 1535, St. John Fisher, 71 years old and hardly able to walk, was taken from the Tower of London to nearby Tower Hill. Upon the scaffold, right before he was beheaded, St. John Fisher spoke, quote, I am come here to die for Christ's Catholic Church, and I thank God. Close quote. Number 6. The Catholic Church has approved the Marian apparition of Our Lady of Good Success at Quito, Ecuador in 1634. In this apparition, the Holy Mother of God told Venerable Mother Mariana de Jesus Torres that in the late 19th century and throughout most of the 20th century, the Church would yield to a great heresy. Our Lady said that the sacrament of matrimony will be attacked and profaned, that iniquitous laws will be enacted with the objective of doing away with this sacrament and making it easy for everyone to live in sin. Our Lady also warned, quote, the Christian spirit will rapidly decay, extinguishing the precious light of faith until it reaches the point that there will be an almost total and general corruption of morals. Close quote. She also spoke of priests becoming careless in their sacred duties, a lack of priestly and religious vocations, innocence no longer being found in children, nor modesty in women. Number 7. Our Lady of La Salette revealed the following, quote, the chiefs, the leaders of the people of God, have neglected prayer and penance, and the devil has bedimmed their intelligence. They have become wandering stars, which the old devil will drag along with his tail to make them perish. A great number of priests and members of religious orders will break away from the true religion. Among these people, there will even be bishops. Close quote. Number 8. Pope Paul VI, on June 29th, 1972, quote, through some crack, the smoke of Satan has entered the Church of God. Close quote. Number 9. On the 56th anniversary of the miracle of the sun, on October the 13th, 1973, in Japan, Our Lady of Akita appeared to Sister Agnes Sasagawa. This is an apparition approved by the Catholic Church. Our Lady of Akita said to Sister Sasagawa, quote, the work of the devil will infiltrate even into the Church in such a way that one will see cardinals opposing cardinals, bishops against bishops. The priests who venerate me will be scorned and opposed by their confreres. Churches and altars will be sacked. The Church will be full of those who accept compromises, and the demon will press many priests and consecrated souls to leave the service of the Lord. Close quote. Number 10. On the 60th anniversary of the miracle of the sun, on October the 13th, 1977, Pope Paul VI exclaimed, quote, the tail of the devil is functioning in the disintegration of the Catholic world. The darkness of Satan has entered and spread throughout the Catholic Church, even to its summit. Apostasy, the loss of faith, is spreading through the world and into the highest levels within the Church. Close quote. Number 11. In 1995, Mario Cardinal Luigi Ciappi, papal theologian to 5 consecutive popes, from Pope Pius XII to Pope John Paul II, communicated to Professor Baumgartner in Salzburg, Austria, quote, in the third secret it is foretold, among other things, that the great apostasy in the Church will begin at the top. Close quote. Number 12. Mrs. Bella Dodd, who converted to the faith shortly before her death, was legal counsel to the Communist Party of the United States. She delivered a series of lectures at Fordham University and elsewhere during the years leading up to Vatican II. The November 2000 issue of the periodical Christian Order recounts this testimony of a monk who attended one of those lectures in the early 1950s. Quote, I listened to that woman for 4 hours, and she had my hair standing on end. Everything she said had been fulfilled to the letter. You would think she was the world's greatest prophet, but she was no prophet. She was merely exposing the step-by-step battle plan of communist subversion of the Catholic Church. she explained that of all the world's religions, the Catholic Church was the only one feared by the communists, for it was the only effective opponent. The whole idea was to destroy not the institution of the Church, but rather the faith of the people, and even use the institution of the Church, if possible, to destroy the faith through the promotion of a pseudo-religion, something that resembled Catholicism, but was not the real thing. Once the faith was destroyed, she explained that there would be a guilt complex introduced into the Church to label the Church of the past as being oppressive, authoritarian, full of prejudices, arrogant in claiming to be the sole possessor of truth, and responsible for divisions of religious bodies throughout the centuries. This would be necessary in order to shame church leaders into an openness to the world and to a more flexible attitude toward all religions and philosophies. The communists would then exploit this openness in order to undermine the Church. Close quote. Number 13. In a 1990 interview, Father Malachi Martin commented, quote, "Nowadays, in many churches, if you find confession, which can be difficult, you find that it is a chat between you and the priest. Sometimes he'll walk with you in the garden and talk to you. It's a friendly chat between people. Originally, you went to a priest to be absolved from your sins. Nowadays, the belief is that a priest doesn't do any absolution. You are sorry for your sins and he gives you a blessing. Confession is gone. Confession is gone because sin is gone." Close quote. Number 14. In a 1991 interview, Father Malachi Martin stated, quote, "Within the Church, there is a substantial body of bishops and cardinals who are utterly opposed to two things. They are opposed to the Roman Mass as we knew it prior to Vatican II, and they are opposed to anything to do with Our Lady. They don't want any news about Fatima. They don't want any news about Akita. They don't even want any news about Lourdes. There is an international coordinated effort to attack and denigrate Fatima and put it in a lesser light. This is a sign of Satan's activity. The most pathetic and frightening thing for me is to come across whole parishes that never hear that the Mass is the sacrifice of Calvary. Under the leadership of the parish priest and under the orders of the bishop, the parish's catechisms, religious books, and sermons all reflect a falling away from the faith. The children don't know their catechism. They don't know the Church's basic doctrines. They are not Catholic any longer, but they don't know it. That is the devastation of Christ's Church. If you ask me what really is the fundamental cause of the descent of the Church into shambles, my answer is that it is the disruption and the destruction of the Mass." Close quote. Number 15. In 1990 and 1991 interviews, Father Malachi Martin further stated, quote, "Today, many bishops and priests are apostates. They are not Catholic any longer. Catholic means somebody who knows that the Mass is the sacrifice of Calvary, has devotion to Our Lady, is devoted to the Holy Father, prays, and fulfills the laws of the Church. Nowadays, we don't have that type of Catholic clergy in many places. There are hundreds of bishops who are outside the Church in their doctrine and teaching. Then there is the behavior of the bishops. There are homosexual bishops in the United States who have known homosexual companions in their houses." Close quote. It's not without reason that St. John Chrysostom, Doctor of the Church, declares, quote, "The corridors of hell are lined with the skulls of bishops." Close quote. Number 16. On December the 13th, 2005, Father Bob Hotzen filed a lawsuit against Edward Cardinal Egan of New York and 9 other Catholic officials and institutions, claiming a pattern of, quote, "retaliation and harassment," close quote, that began after Hotzen alleged a cover-up of clergy abuse in New York and started helping victims. Father Hodson alleged that Cardinal Egan is, quote, actively homosexual, close quote, and that he has, quote, personal knowledge of this, close quote. His suit named 2 other top Catholic clerics in the region as actively gay, Albany Bishop Howard Hubbard and Newark Archbishop John Myers. Father Hodson claims that actively gay bishops are too afraid of being exposed themselves to turn in pedophile priests. The bishops' closeted homosexuality, as the lawsuit states, quote, has compromised defendants' ability to supervise and control predators and has served as a reason for the retaliation, close quote. Just recently, the Hartford Courant reported that during Cardinal Egan's 12 years as Bishop of Bridgeport, he repeatedly failed to investigate priests where there were obvious signs of abuse. The Bridgeport diocese had to settle the cases and awarded victims some $12 to $15 million in damages. Referring to one incredible case of negligence, according to the Hartford Courant, in 1990, Egan received a memo about, quote, a developing pattern of accusations, close quote, that Reverend Charles Carr of Norwalk had fondled young boys. Egan kept Carr working for another 5 years, only suspending him after a lawsuit was filed, and then in 1999 making him a chaplain at Danbury's Hospital. How about another? The Connecticut Post also reported that early in his reign, dozens of people came forward to accuse Reverend Raymond Polka of Greenwich of sexual abuse and violence against children. Egan claimed that the accusers were never proved to be telling the truth. Well, Egan never even bothered to interview them and kept Polka in ministry. Writing for Business Insider on February the 8th, 2012, Michael Brendan Doherty, who lived in the New York Archdiocese under Cardinal Egan's reign, points out that Egan did punish some priests, but not child abusers. He swiftly punished and evicted those Catholic priests that said the traditional Latin Mass if he thought they didn't pay him sufficient deference. According to Doherty, Egan coddled child abusers and persecuted decent priests during his ignominious reign as a prince of the church. And number 17. The following is from an article published by Eric Junta on April 21st, 2010 on RenewAmerica.com. In 2004, a group of concerned lay Catholics of the Miami Archdiocese constituted themselves a lay watchdog organization under the name Christi Fidelis. They were moved to do so by what they have alleged is a gay superculture running the archdiocese. Among the allegations, the vast majority of the archdiocese's priests are sexually active gays. Many priests were misappropriating parish funds to live exorbitant lifestyles. And Archbishop Favalora and Vicar General Monsignor William Hennessy are implicated in this superculture. On April 20th, 2010, the Holy See compelled Favalora to submit his resignation. There are hundreds of pages of documentation consisting mostly of anonymous testimony accusing various diocesan priests of wanton promiscuity and financial misdeeds over the course of Favalora's reign. A former priest of the Miami Archdiocese noted, quote, "You couldn't run the archdiocese without gay clergy, not the Archdiocese of Miami or any other one," close quote. Indeed, the enemy is within. Almost 100 years ago, Our Lady of Fatima came down to earth to urge us to pray the Holy Rosary and to do penance. She warned us that the great apostasy in the church would begin at the top. Beware, the enemy is very much within the Holy Roman Catholic Church. On the most sacred night in the history of mankind, as the Son of God instituted the Eucharist and the priesthood, the serpent was there, whispering in the ear of Judas Iscariot. Let's go through some examples. Number 1, at the Last Supper, John chapter 13, verse 21, quote, When Jesus had said these things, he was troubled in spirit, and he testified and said, Amen, amen, I say to you, one of you shall betray me. Close quote. Same chapter, verses 26 and 27. Quote, And when he had dipped the bread, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. And after the morsel, Satan entered into him. And Jesus said to him, That which thou dost, do quickly. Close quote. Number 2. In the Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew chapter 10, the Son of God tells his 12 disciples, quote, The brother also shall deliver up the brother to death, and the father the son, and the children shall rise up against their parents, and shall put them to death. And you shall be hated by all men for my name's sake. But he that shall persevere unto the end, he shall be saved. And when they shall persecute you in this city, flee into another. Close quote. Number 3. On December the 26th, 1957, Sister Lucia Fatima spoke to Father Fuentes, saying, quote, The Blessed Virgin Mary told me that the devil is in the mood for engaging in a decisive battle against the Virgin. From now on, we must choose sides. Either we are for God, or we are for the devil. There is no other possibility. Close quote. Number 4. The heresy of Arianism caused catastrophic confusion in the Church from 336 AD to 381 AD. Arianism was condemned in 325 AD at Nicaea, where the First Ecumenical Council was held. Yet, in the year 336, it arose again. The heresy eventually claimed about 90% of the bishops before it was finally defeated about 50 years later. And the resulting confusion and loss of faith, even the great Saint Athanasius was persecuted and sent into exile. Number 5. St. John Gualbert, abbot, was born in Florence, Italy, at the end of the 10th century. He became the founder of the Vallambrosian Benedictines. St. John's heroic virtue is demonstrated by his having forgiven the murderer of his own brother. Before becoming a monk, he had been searching for his brother's murderer with a band of soldiers. When they found the murderer put his arms in the form of a cross and asked for mercy for the sake of Christ crucified. St. John forgave him. And through this great act of forgiveness, God led St. John to become a monk. Despite his exemplary Christian mercy and forgiveness, St. John Gualbert did not hesitate to seek the removal of a corrupt prelate of his own day. St. John went to Rome to ask the Pope to remove the Archbishop of Florence because he was unworthy of his office. The grounds for St. John's petition was that the Archbishop had paid money to certain persons of influence in order to have himself appointed Archbishop. Number 6. The apparition of the Blessed Virgin Mary at La Salette was approved by the Catholic Church in 1851. According to Our Lady of La Salette, quote, The vicar of my son will have much to suffer, as for a time the Church will be the victim of a great persecution. This will be a time of darkness. The Church will suffer a terrible crisis. All the civil governments will have one and the same plan, which will be to abolish and do away with every religious principle to make way for materialism, atheism, and vice of all kinds. Rome will lose the faith and become the seat of the Antichrist. Close quote. Number 7. In the late 1930s, before he became Pope Pius XII, Eugenio Cardinal Pacelli stated, quote, I am worried by the Blessed Virgin's messages to Lucia Fatima. This persistence of Mary about the dangers which menace the Church is a divine warning against the suicide of altering the faith in her liturgy, her theology, and her soul. Close quote. Number 8. Before his death in 1981, Father Joaquin Alonso, who for 16 years was the official archivist of Fatima, testified as follows in reference to the third secret of Fatima. Quote, It is therefore completely probable that the text makes concrete references to the crisis of faith within the Church and to the negligence of the pastors themselves and the internal struggles in the very bosom of the church and of grave pastoral negligence of the upper hierarchy. Close quote. Number 9. In a 1991 interview with Father Malachi Martin, he said the following, quote, "Everything we know from the saints and the popes from the 19th century onwards tells us that our particular century is the crisis time in that 2,000-year-old battle between Christ and Satan. If we are to be quite frank, we must say that there has been a huge increase in public or legislated sin. There has been a huge increase in the number of abortions. There's been a huge increase in the amount of pornography. These developments must be attributed to an intense activity on the part of Satan. I think we are witnessing the slope up to the crisis point of the big battle between Lucifer and Mary, the Mother of God." Close quote. Number 10. Father Malachi Martin in a 1991 interview said, quote, "The churchmen will not take real action because they don't want trouble. They don't want to be unpopular. They don't want martyrdom. Many bishops and priests think that there is nothing wrong with abortion. They have lost their faith. They are no longer Catholic. They have become some form of neo-Catholic, which is halfway between the Episcopalians and Rotarian clubs. In the field of education, the situation is even worse. There is no doubt that the teaching of catechism, the teaching of religion has disappeared. The Jesuits, Dominicans, Carmelites, and Franciscans have become secularized. And you can no longer speak about Catholic colleges. There is no way to estimate the damage that has been done. Today, Marxists, lesbians, and homosexuals have equal rights on Catholic campuses. They teach about condoms, the homosexual way of life, and euthanasia. Catholic education establishments want to be like others. They want to buy into the system, but unfortunately, the system is immoral. So the condition of the church is very sad from that point of view. In addition to these problems is the fact that the church is riven by factions. The vast majority of Catholics in Western countries have now been weaned away from the church as it was. They no longer pray the same way. They no longer worship the same way. They no longer think the same way. Fast and abstinence is out. Our church is being thoroughly secularized because faith has disappeared. Close quote. Number 11. Pope John Paul II, writing about the church in Europe in his apostolic exhortation, Ecclesia in Europa, June the 28th, 2003, number 9, states, quote, "At the root of this loss of hope is an attempt to promote a vision of man apart from God and apart from Christ. European culture gives the impression of silent apostasy on the part of people who have all that they need and who live as if God does not exist." Number 12. Bernard Jansen, Canadian journalist and publisher, wrote in 1990, quote, "There is often a huge discrepancy between the reality of a given situation and its image being projected to the public. The period of church history following Vatican II has been presented by the current ecclesiastical establishment as a great renewal and a second Pentecost. The hard realities of statistical decline, widespread loss of faith among churchmen, and endless scandals confirm that this public relations exercise has been an act of great deception." Close quote. And might I remind you that the father of lies and deception is none other than Satan himself. Number 13. Father Malachi Martin, in a 1990 interview, said, quote, "Oh, I think that the new Mass is the fountainhead of all our difficulties. It is a calamity because Monsignore Annibale Bonini drew up that Mass deliberately to create a non-Catholic ceremony. A difficulty with the new Mass is that it has given rise to invalid Masses. It has also removed people's minds from the central point of the Mass, the sacrifice at Calvary. It is now a communal meal held at a table. The priest is the minister. We, the people, have a meal together." Close quote. It's not without reason that St. John Chrysostom, doctor of the Church, declares, quote, "The corridors of hell are lined with the skulls of bishops." Close quote. Number 14. In the early 2000s, an international internet chat line of homosexual priests called St. Sebastian's Angels was exposed. The site consisted of pornographic photographs and obscene language and conversations among homosexual Catholic clergymen. Particularly offensive is the foul-mouthed Bishop Reginald Cockett, the auxiliary bishop of Cape Town, South Africa, who expresses his homosexual fantasies over this chat line. For over 2 years, Cockett suffered no sanctions by the Vatican. He remained South African Catholic Bishops' Conference's Episcopal Representative for AIDS and Social Communications. Bishop Cockett resigned in disgrace only after the Washington Times ran stories that exposed his involvement with St. Sebastian's Angels. Number 15. Archbishop Rembert Weekland, former head of the Milwaukee Archdiocese, resigned in 2002 over a homosexual and financial scandal. Paul Marceau, a former Marquette University theology student, revealed in May 2002 that he was paid $450,000 to settle a sexual assault claim he made against the Archbishop more than 2 decades earlier. The money came from the Archdiocese. Weekland also failed to stop sexually abusive priests and allowed them to be in active ministry without alerting parishioners or police. Advocates for abuse victims say that Weekland's cover-up of his own sexual activity was part of a pattern of secrecy that included concealing the criminal behavior of child molesters. Number 16. In March of 2002, Pope John Paul II received a canonical petition from various members of the faithful in the Archdiocese of San Antonio, Texas, seeking the removal of Archbishop Flores from office on grounds that he had covered up criminal acts of sexual abuse by homosexual priests under his charge and paid millions of dollars in hush money to silence the victims of these predators. The petition to the Pope charges that Archbishop Flores has, quote, been grossly negligent in the exercise of his episcopal office, has failed to protect the temporal goods of the Archdiocese, and had endangered the faith of the people entrusted to his care by allowing sexual predators within the clergy free rein. And number 17. In June of 2010, court documents confirmed that former Los Angeles Archbishop Roger Cardinal Mahoney admitted in a sworn deposition to sheltering an abusive priest during the 1980s. The abuser, Father Michael Baker, is currently serving a 10-year prison term. The Archdiocese of Los Angeles agreed to pay a record-setting $660 million in 2007 to more than 500 alleged victims. John Manley, the plaintiff's attorney, described the Cardinal's statements in his deposition as that of somebody who obfuscates, dodges, lies, and explains away everything. Close quote. Indeed, the enemy is within. Almost 100 years ago, Our Lady of Fatima came down to earth to urge us to pray the Holy Rosary and to do penance. She warned us that the great apostasy in the Church would begin at the top. We see the disciples in a boat with Jesus. St. Augustine, doctor of the Church, teaches that the boat represents the Church. I ask you to make special note of 3 things. 1, there is a great tempest, a storm. 2, Jesus is asleep. Apparently he's out of the picture. And 3, the words of the Son of God. Why are you fearful, O ye of little faith? Please listen, because today too there is a great tempest threatening Holy Mother Church. Look and see what is happening, even in our very own diocese right now. There is a great tempest and a great storm that is rocking and shaking the bark of Peter. This is happening even more so now, namely that the enemy is within the hierarchy. Everybody remember this, because this is basically the theme of tonight's sermon. It's scary and it's very sad, but it is the reality. And it's not just a question of what we're witnessing right now in our own lives. I'm going to go through and give you so many examples so that you'll also realize this is something that God and our Blessed Mother have been telling us and have been warning us about. And this is also punishment because we haven't been faithful to God. If the enemy is within, and within the hierarchy, very rooted in the hierarchy, it's never just a question of us washing our hands and going around and blaming others, or even our shepherds. If we have bad shepherds, we've been bad Catholics. Ever since our blessed Lord founded His church, Satan has used all his cunning and power to poison the souls of those in the hierarchy. Let's go through some examples. 1. At the Last Supper, John chapter 13, verse 21, quote, "When Jesus had said these things, He was troubled in spirit, and He testified and said, 'Amen, amen, I say to you, one of you shall betray me.'" Verses 26 and 27 from chapter 13, John's Gospel, quote, "And when He had dipped the bread, He gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. And after the morsel, Satan entered into him. And Jesus said to him, 'That which thou dost, do quickly.'" Close quote. Number 2, St. Paul, the great apostle, speaking to the bishops and clergy in Ephesus. Bishops and clergy in Ephesus. This is Acts chapter 20, verses 28 to 30. St. Paul says the following, quote, "Take heed to yourselves and to the whole flock, wherein the Holy Ghost hath placed you bishops to rule the church of God, which He hath purchased with His own blood. I know that after my departure, raving wolves will enter in among you, not sparing the flock. And of your own selves shall arise men speaking perverse things to draw away disciples after them." Number 3, 2 days ago on January the 27th was the feast of St. John Chrysostom, Doctor of the Church. Along with St. Basil, St. Gregory Nazianzen, and St. Athanasius, St. John Chrysostom is counted as one of the 4 great Eastern doctors of the Catholic Church. St. John Chrysostom was born in 344 AD, and he spent most of his life in Antioch, the city where the 7 Maccabees were martyred and where men were first called Christians. When St. John was about 30, he lived in isolation for about 6 years just outside of Antioch, first under the supervision of Diodorus of Tarsus, a holy monk, and then for 2 years as a hermit, living a very strict penitential life. For example, during those 2 years, he never lay down to sleep, but remained in a sitting position. St. John was then ordained a deacon in 381 and a priest in 386. 12 years later, in 398 AD, he was consecrated as Archbishop and Patriarch of Constantinople. St. John Chrysostom was just the opposite of his predecessor, the easygoing Bishop Nectarius. St. John began to clean house, giving the clergy more work and insisting on more prayer. He required monks to return to their monasteries instead of wandering about as some of them did. St. John Chrysostom gave no banquets, ate a scanty meal in the evening, dressed poorly, sold the rich furnishings of the bishop's palace, and gave money, food, and clothing to the poor. 2 of his greatest enemies were bishops. Severianus, bishop of Gabala in Syria, and Theophilus, the patriarch of Alexandria in Egypt. With the help and support of the empress Eudoxia, Theophilus, again the patriarch of Alexandria, Theophilus gathered a group of bishops from Egypt, and they held a bogus council to depose St. John Chrysostom. They raised false and frivolous accusations against him, that he had deposed the deacon for beating a servant, that he had called several of his clergy base men, that he had ordained priests in his domestic chapel, that he sold things belonging to the church, that nobody knew what became of his revenues, and that he ate alone. They also accused him of treason against the emperor. The emperor issued an order for his banishment, but it was opposed by the people, who assembled about the church to guard their pastor. He gave them a farewell sermon and said, quote, "Violent storms encompass me on all sides, yet I am without fear, because I stand upon a rock. Though the sea roar and the waves rise high, they cannot sink the vessel of Jesus. I fear not death, which is my gain, nor banishment, for the whole earth is the Lord's, nor the loss of goods, for I came naked into the world and must leave it in the same condition. Christ is with me. Whom shall I fear?" Close quote. St. John Chrysostom, Doctor of the Church. 4. St. John Gualbert, Abbot, was born in Florence, Italy at the end of the 10th century. He became the founder of the Vallambrosian Benedictines. St. John's heroic Christian virtue is demonstrated by his having forgiven the murderer of his own brother. Before becoming a monk, he had been searching for his brother's murderer with a band of soldiers. When they found the murderer put his arms in the form of a cross and asked for mercy for the sake of Christ crucified. St. John Gualbert forgave him, and through this great act of forgiveness, God led St. John to become a monk. Now listen carefully, because despite his exemplary Christian mercy and forgiveness, St. John Gualbert did not hesitate to seek the removal of a corrupt prelate of his own day. St. John went to Rome to ask the Pope to remove the Archbishop of Florence because he was unworthy of his office. The grounds for St. John's petition was that the Archbishop had paid money to certain persons of influence in order to have himself appointed Archbishop. Number 5. Pope Leo XIII reigned for 25 years, from 1878 to 1903, and he died at the age of 93 in the year 1903. During his pontificate, he became aware of the massive infiltration of atheism, occultism, and all forms of evil penetrating society. He was especially troubled by the influence of the Masons, whose object is the ruination of the Catholic Church. He had a most unusual experience with regard to the devil. While consulting with a number of cardinals in the private Vatican chapel on October 13th, 1884. Notice also the date, October 13th, 1884. That's exactly 33 years before the miracle of the sun in Fatima. So on that day, he happened to pass before the altar, where he stopped suddenly and seemed to lose all awareness of his surroundings. His slender face grew pale, his eyes stared in horror, and he stood motionless for several minutes until those around him thought he was about to die. His physician rushed to his side, but in a moment or two the Pope recovered and almost painfully exclaimed, "Oh, what terrifying words I have heard." The Pope then composed the famous prayer to St. Michael the Archangel. After a time, Pope Leo XIII confided what occurred in his vision. The devil, in a guttural voice, had boasted to God that he could destroy the church if he was given more time and more power. He then asked God for 75 years, then 100 years. His request was granted by God, with the understanding that there would be a penalty when he failed. After that vision of Pope Leo XIII, that's also why he mandated that the 3 Hail Marys and the prayer to St. Michael the Archangel be prayed after every low Mass. Obviously, every time that there's not a traditional Latin Mass, those prayers aren't even being prayed. Prayers for protection of the Church against the devil. Number 6. In his encyclical letter, Pascendi Dominici Gregis, September the 8th, 1907, in which he condemned the heresy of modernism, Pope St. Pius X wrote that the heretics were, quote, "not only among the Church's open enemies, but what is to be most dreaded and deplored is that they are in her very bosom," close quote. He calls these modernists, quote, "the most pernicious of all the adversaries of the Church," and he says that they seek to destroy the Church from within. And then he says this danger, quote, "is present almost in the very veins and heart of the Church," close quote. Number 7. In the late 1930s, before he became Pope Pius XII, Eugenio Cardinal Pacelli stated, quote, "I am worried by the Blessed Virgin's messages to Lucy of Fatima. This persistence of Mary about the dangers which menace the Church is a divine warning against the suicide of altering the faith in her liturgy, her theology, and her soul. Number 8. In a December 26, 1957 interview with Father Fuentes, Sister Lucia Fatima said the following, quote, "That which afflicts the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the heart of Jesus is the fall of religious and priestly souls. The devil knows that religious and priests who fall away from their beautiful vocation drag numerous souls to hell. The devil wishes to take possession of consecrated souls. He tries to corrupt them in order to lull to sleep the souls of lay people and thereby lead them to final impenitence." Close quote. I'm about halfway here, but I'm going to interrupt just so you don't forget what we're doing. We're trying to see how, throughout the history of the Church, the greatest authorities, even the Mother of God and the popes, have been warning us that the greatest enemy is within the Church, at the highest levels of the hierarchy. We continue. Number 9. From 1958 until 1964, Father Malachi Martin, a Jesuit, served in Rome, where he was a close associate of Augustine Cardinal B and 2 popes, John the 23rd and Paul the 6th. According to Father Martin, a diabolical ceremony called the enthronement of the fallen angel Lucifer was held in St. Paul's Chapel within the Vatican and was linked with concurrent satanic rites in the U.S., quite possibly Charleston, South Carolina, on June the 29th, 1963, barely a week after the election of Pope Paul VI. According to Father Martin, Satan was thus formally enthroned in the Vatican. Number 10. On the 9th anniversary of his coronation as Pope, on the feast of Saints Peter and Paul on June the 29th, 1972, Pope Paul VI preached the following, quote, "We believed that after the council would come a day of sunshine in the history of the Church, but instead there has come a day of clouds and storms and of darkness. And how did this come about? There has been a power, an adversary power. Let us call him by his name, the devil. It is as if from some mysterious crack, the smoke of Satan has entered the temple of God." Close quote. Number 11. On the 56th anniversary of the miracle of the sun, on October 13th, 1973, in Japan, Our Lady of Akita, our Blessed Mother, told Sister Agnes Sasagawa, quote, "The work of the devil will infiltrate even into the Church in such a way that one will see cardinals opposing cardinals, bishops against bishops. The priests who venerate me will be scorned and opposed by their confreres. Churches and altars will be sacked." San Juan Bautista, the church and the altar was sacked. Churches and altars will be sacked. The church will be full of those who accept compromises, and the demon will press many priests and consecrated souls to leave the service of the Lord. Number 12. On the 60th anniversary of the miracle of the sun, on October 13th, 1977, Pope Paul VI exclaimed, quote, "The tail of the devil is functioning in the disintegration of the Catholic world. The darkness of Satan has entered and spread throughout the Catholic Church, even to its summit. Apostasy, the loss of the faith, is spreading throughout the world and into the highest levels within the Church." Number 13. Before his death in 1981, Father Joaquin Alonso, who for 16 years was the official archivist of Fatima, testified as follows in reference to the third secret of Fatima, quote, "It is therefore completely probable that the text makes concrete references to the crisis of faith within the Church and to the negligence of the pastors themselves and the internal struggles in the very bosom of the Church and of grave pastoral negligence of the upper hierarchy." Close quote. Number 14. On March 17, 1990, Cardinal Ori gave the following testimony to Italian journalist Lucio Brunelli, quote, "The third secret has nothing to do with Gorbachev. The Blessed Virgin was alerting us against apostasy in the Church." Number 15. Cardinal Chappi, papal theologian to 5 consecutive popes, from Pope Pius XII to Pope John Paul II, said, quote, "In the third secret it is foretold, among other things, that the great apostasy in the Church will begin at the top." Close quote. Now, this is a little bit longer, but very important. Listen to it. Very insightful. So that more of you will also realize. Listen very carefully to this testimony by Father Malachi Martin. I know it's hard and a lot of people will still not get it. That's okay. We'll be patient. We'll continue to pray, persevere. But basically Father Malachi Martin is saying you look at the church and it's no longer the Catholic Church. It's a fake. He talks about the underground church. I won't read that, but he talks about how the true Catholics are the ones that are in the underground getting persecuted. Listen to what he says. 16. In a 1992 interview with Father Malachi Martin, he said the following. And all this is his quote. I'm just going to read exactly what he said. Quote, anybody looking at the church today can see all the elements that were there in 1950. A pope, cardinals, bishops, priests, nuns, seminaries, diocesan newspapers, institutes, publishing houses, missions, and religious orders. The appearances are all there. What most people cannot admit is that all this is an illusion. The organization as it was then no longer exists. It is a facade. In the institutional organization that functioned in 1950, the Pope was united with the bishops with the priests, and the priests with the nuns and the people. There was a whole flow of command and obedience flowing up and down. The organization was carefully nourished in doctrine and discipline. Rules and punishments for infraction of rules kept the cohesion tight. This is gone. It doesn't exist any longer. There are no 10 bishops who agree on anything. There are no 200 priests who agree on anything. There is no cohesion about the real presence of the Blessed Sacrament, about devotion to Our Lady, about the value of celibacy, about the value of purity, about the value of marriage. Hint, hint, Catholics who aren't defending marriage, about the value of marriage or about the value of human life. We are riven with dissension. Most American Roman Catholics accept contraception. The majority accept abortion as a choice. A high percentage accept homosexuality. What is this? Barely half of American Catholics go to Mass and Holy Communion. And we have homosexuality rife in the seminaries run by the bishops. We have heretics teaching in the seminaries run by the bishops. Come on! The church as we knew it doesn't exist any longer. And Rome can't do anything about it. Cardinal Ratzinger can't do anything about it. The Pope can't do anything about it. They know everything about it but can't do anything about it. Then we find that there is a ring of priests in the Archdiocese of Chicago which has been practicing satanic pedophilia amongst themselves and killing any dissident member of their own group. For how many years has this been going on? And nobody has done anything about it. Come on, the organization is a facade. Of course it is a facade. The church as an organization doesn't exist as it once did. Close quote. And then one final quote, also from Father Malachi Martin. Quote, I am always amazed at the horror of the old Roman Mass and the hatred of it, especially by many of our bishops and priests. I am a priest. If tomorrow I went down to the local church, St. Vincent Ferris Parish at 66th Street in Lexington, and wore Bermuda shorts, a rugby shirt, and a yellow cap, and had 2 cockatoos on my shoulder, and then proceeded to say an innovative Mass, they would be amazed at my creativity. If I went there in square Roman vestments and started off by saying, Introibo ad altare Dei, they would call the police. That is the difference. There is a hatred of the old Mass. And the final one, number 17, in March of 2002, Pope John Paul II received a canonical petition from various members of the faithful in the Archdiocese of San Antonio, Texas, seeking the removal of Archbishop Flores from his office on grounds that he had covered up criminal acts of sexual abuse by homosexual priests under his charge and paid millions of dollars in hush money to silence the victims of these predators. There's much, 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 much more. I'd encourage you also, if you're interested, it's kind of a sickening read, but there's also a very important book called Am Church, which basically is showing that the church in America is no longer the Catholic Church. But if you're interested in reading that book, it's got a lot of documented corruption among the hierarchy in the United States Church. That's available also at the little bookstore there on Rosa Street. What's our response? This is really just the conclusion, because I just want to really drive home the point to all of you. We are living during a very serious crisis in the history of the Catholic Church. Open your eyes. And it's not just because of what's happening to us right now. When you compare it with everything we've just heard, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, what we're living through is peanuts. Believe me, it's nothing. What's our response? I'll mention 4. 1, our main response will always be Jesus and Mary. Please recall the words of the Son of God from today's Gospel. The Son of God has spoken to us today. Why are you fearful, O ye of little faith? It's a test of our faith. If we're faithful to Christ and Holy Mother Church through these trials, our faith will be purified and it will grow stronger. It is a test of our faith. Respice stellam voca Mariam. Look on the star, call upon Mary. She is the star of power. When our enemies encompass us for our destruction, respice stellam voca Mariam. Look on the star, call upon Mary. She is the star of hope. When discouragement takes possession of us at the sight of our own sins and weakness and utter infidelity to God, respice stellam voca Mariam. She is the star of protection. When the soul is, so to speak, submerged in the floods of temptation or trial or sorrow, respice stellam voca Mariam. She is the star of joy and consolation. When sadness embitters the heart, look on the star, call upon Mary. Our first response, and please everybody remember this. I'm going to mention other things. Don't get bogged down between Bishop Ochoa, Father Rodriguez, San Juan, these people, Monsignor Banuelas, all these things. Jesus and Mary is our first response. That means the Holy Mass and the prayer of the Holy Rosary. If every single person here makes a serious commitment to be more faithful to Holy Mass, this is Jesus' sacrifice. And especially the traditional Latin Mass. And everybody makes the commitment to pray the Holy Rosary. Some people tell me, Father, the months have passed and the people aren't gathering in the homes to pray the Rosary anymore. Let's get cracking. The battle's barely beginning. We have to pray the Holy Rosary. Holy Mass and the Holy Rosary. Number 2, what's our response? How should we be responding to this great enemy that is within the church? Study the faith. All of us have to be studying our faith. What's happening in the church is happening because we don't know what's going on. And then we have false priests and even false bishops preaching and teaching things that are heresies. And we don't know the difference. And we're living in a city where the vast majority of Catholics are not standing up for the sanctity of marriage, for the sanctity of life. A society that legalizes sodomy? That's straight from hell. Study the faith. There's at least one weekly class that's being given. There's a lot of literature and audio recordings that are available, especially on the Latin Mass, so you can learn more. There's a whole series of talks that were given on the message of Our Lady of Fatima. You can get those on audio recording. Every one of us, we should be studying our faith every day, listening to these sermons and things that are all available. So 2 is study the faith. 3, work hard. Please, this is where one of my memories of San Juan is que muchos flojitos ahí en la parroquia. No se crean, no todos. Pero the point here is we have to work hard. I mean, it's sad. I'm out there in Presidio. Then I hear reports, well, Father, it looks like not too many people are trying to get petitions spread or doing much. People, well, I got this, I got that. We have to work hard. Work hard means every single day. For our faith, for Holy Mother Church, for the conversion of bishops and priests, first and foremost. And there's a lot that you can do. I mean, if there's anybody that says, I want to work at this full time, you better believe you're going to be working full time. Again, among some of the things that you can do when I say work hard is, obviously first and foremost, that prayer, Holy Mass and the Rosary. Don't neglect to pray the Holy Rosary, especially for a holy new bishop, for our faith here in El Paso, for our conversion, for the conversion of our priests, our women religious. But also remember, in terms of working hard, you can sign those 2 petitions. They're very important petitions. One for a parish based on the Latin Mass. Another one for a holy bishop. I'll give you just one example. There are a couple of the women here that have done a wonderful job with these petitions. One of them, I think, has gotten over 150 signatures on one of those petitions for the holy bishop. Another one's gotten about 60 or 70. And they've been going to different places, catechism classes and I don't know what. They're working hard. So much so that at one of those places, I don't know all the details, but one of the authorities at that parish told her that she was doing something illegal. Imagine the enemy within the church. Here you have a devout, pious woman, loves her church, loves God, and is trying to get others to sign a petition to ask the Holy Father to send us a holy bishop. And authorities in the local church are telling her that that's illegal? Are you kidding me? The enemy is within.
Keep the priest away from labor, from the altar, from virtue. Seek adroitly to otherwise occupy his thoughts and his hours. Make him lazy, a gourmet, politically active. He will become ambitious, intriguing, and perverse. It is corruption en masse that we have undertaken, the corruption of the people by the clergy, and the corruption of the clergy by ourselves. The corruption which ought one day to enable us to put the church in her tomb. Keep the priest away from labor, the altar, from virtue. Seek to occupy his thoughts and his hours. Make him lazy, a gourmet, and politically active. And he'll become ambitious, intriguing, and perverse. Keep the priest away from labor, altar, and virtue, and he will become perverse. Let's just ponder a few of the developments since then. Corruption of priests. Belladad was a communist who served as legal counsel to the Communist Party in the United States until she encountered Bishop Sheen, who brought her into the church by a miracle of grace. She stated, quote, "In the 1930s, we put 1,100 men into the priesthood in order to destroy the church from within." These young men weren't necessarily communists. They were young radicals, and the idea was for them to be ordained and then strive for positions of influence and authority. In 1953, Manning Johnson, another formal official of the Communist Party here in the United States, testified before the House Un-American Activities Committee, quote, "The tactic of infiltration of religious organizations was set up by the Kremlin. In the earliest stages, it was determined that it would be necessary to concentrate communist agents in the seminaries because these institutions would make it possible for a small communist minority to influence the ideology of future clergymen in paths conducive to communist purposes." Close quote. As Our Lady had warned, if we didn't stop offending God, Russia would spread her errors throughout the world.